I'm going to start talking now. I'm hitting the live button. I think we're live. Who knows how YouTube works? Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the freaking gosh darn best show ever to exist, ever, anywhere, ever for eternity. The Over Sharon Show. I
And
started
thanks for
watching
the
some.
moment of silence.
Yeah, I
And
gave a little. We were going to do a moment of silence now before we go live so we don't see anything, that people, we don't want them to hear, like our stock picks. Just kidding. Um, yeah, I've been watching some Rick and Morty amongst other things, so I'm a little. I don't know if you've seen Rick and Morty, but sometimes they improvise some of this stuff. They do this interdimensional cable episode every once in a while where they just watch shows from other dimensions, and a lot of it is just like them ad-libbing stuff. It's really
that's
funny.
funny. That reminds me of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I mentioned before. And I've been listening to that audiobook or, audio series or whatever it was from back in the day
Yeah,
on
I gotta get back. I
BBC.
gotta get into that. Watch the most original movie.
It's very,
It's
very
funny
silly.
because Rick and Morty, like, so when I went through my whole wake up, whatever it was, and I was going through like my Dark Night of the Soul or whatever, I kind of stopped watching a lot of TV. I'd watch a little bit of things, but I just had this judgmental, stance. Like I used to like to watch Rick and Morty, and then I'd watch it and I'd be like, oh, look at all this stuff they're sticking in here. Rick, the main character, he's like an atheist basically or whatever, and he's just saying all this stuff is terrible. But then now that I'm watching it with new eyes, I'm like, oh, it doesn't mean that that's what the show is like promoting. Maybe some people think it, but it's really just showing a total narcissist because Rick Sanchez is supposed to be like the smartest guy in all the dimensions in the universe and everything, but he still just has the worst times. Like the things just go wrong for him, and you could see how he's doing it all himself.
And
So it
it's like
really
he's a
is.
Latino, huh? How
Yeah, yeah.
dare they?
I don't know. I don't know why they made his name Sanchez though. But that is pretty hilarious. Yeah, so it's funny because you see all these little things and how they fail and all this stuff, and
And
you're
it's
really
all
seeing,
his own doing.
yeah, you're
You
seeing
create
inside the
your own
mind of a
reality.
narcissist. Yeah, and how he deals with like his daughter and how, because there's even a section sometimes we'll go to therapy, and the therapist like nails it with all the stuff that he's doing. It's so
Wow.
funny. Yeah, so um, yeah. Anyway, so I think that the whole lesson of this is just, you
Perspective.
know, perspective. Really, it's not that things are good or evil or bad or whatever. It's just how you're going to look at it.
Exactly.
And I really enjoy stuff that makes me laugh because the comedy there is pretty. I mean, it's hard to explain. There's like like toilet comedy, or whatever, like you call it trashy, but there's also some stuff in there that's really uh for smart people, I guess you can say. For us smarties. But anyway, enough of the Rick and Morty show. It's more about the Over Sharon show, and we're continuing our series today on the Tao. So let me read the quote, and then we'll get into it because I know before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about this year, and we're like, why don't we record or why don't we go live so we can share it with everybody? All right, here's our quote today. Sometimes you have to let go of the picture of what you thought it would be like and learn to find joy in the story you are actually living. Rachel Marie Martin. I
Yeah.
love this quote because this is totally, this is one of the big things that people that are doing this work learn after a while because especially when you're coming from the ego, even when you think you know what the ego is and you think you destroy the ego, there's that spiritual ego that we always talk about. And I feel like that perspective that you have come through the lens of that ego or whatever, you think that you know what's best and you know what you want to happen, so you're making all these plans for everything and you got it nailed and you're like, this is what's going to happen, it's all going to be perfect. I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and it's going to be great. But what we don't realize is that even if we're working toward a goal, a lot of people work toward the spiritual goal of doing work on themselves or whatever. They think that when they first start, and I know I thought this too, you would just get to a point and you'd be like, oh, this is great, this is perfect, happily ever after, everything's going to be great. But this realm, the amazing part of this realm is it just keeps throwing challenges at you. You know, no matter what. So no matter what kind of wisdom or knowledge that you gain, you're still going to have to overcome what people might call adversities or issues or whatever it is. There's going to be things that you don't want to do or you're looking forward or you're not looking forward to them that you have to do. And I feel like this quote is just telling you it's a perspective that you can gain that sometimes everything is how it's supposed to be. And everything is perfect and it's going to happen the way that God wants it to happen, that the creator, not you. And your job really is to just choose how you feel when things happen. And this is stuff we talk about all the time, but I like this quote because it really does embody that whole idea of just accepting things and dealing with them the way they are. And again, it's not like the new age thing where you just accept it and you're like, all right, I guess I'm just a slave now. This guy came over and stole my property and he put me in chains. I guess I'm just a slave now. It's no, it's more like, oh, this guy came here, he put me in chains, now what can I do? I guess that's a bad example, but more like
I guess this is what God wanted for me. There must be a
yeah.
lesson in this. There must be a
Have you
good
heard of
thing
that
that's coming
show?
from this.
Yeah, 100%. Have you heard of that show Crowley or Good Omens?
I don't think so.
It's on Netflix and it has two guys in it, one that are like the main guys. One's like an angel and one's a demon. And it's funny. You should check it out because they do Bible stories, but it's like takes place in the present, but they'll flash back to these different stories. And they're actually kind of friends. And neither of them really want to go along with the plan of like Armageddon or ending the world. It's really, really funny. And everybody that's in heaven, all the angels are ready to fight, and all the demons in hell are ready to fight. But these two are just like, why do we even have to have a war? It doesn't make sense. And it's funny because the angels and the demons, not these two guys, but their bosses or whatever, they're going by this strict dogma that they think is what's supposed to happen, but they don't even really know the plan. They're just like, oh yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. That's as it's written. And the guy's like, where's it written? Like, why did it have to happen like this? And I love it because they kind of embody that in the show. They embody more of the Tao. They're actually kind of teaching the Tao in the show through all these examples of different religions and stuff. And I'm there's two seasons. I think half of season one or whatever years ago. It came out like 2018 or 2019. And we've been rewatching it again. And in season two, they talk about Job, and it's really, really kind of mind blowing how they talk about it. And that's what it reminds me of, right? It's so if you're Job, everything's perfect, everything's great, you know, you're just praising God. Then all of a sudden you start losing everything. Everyone dies, your whole family dies, and how you deal with it. And there's a part that's pretty funny where the demon guy is going to kill Job's children, and the angel stops him because in the beginning, like the angel's up there and he's talking to the other angels. And he's like, wait, this is fine. This is okay. He's like, we could just kill his children. Like, yeah, everything's going to come back double. He's going to get double the amount of this, double the amount of children. He's like, yeah, but his wife's like 55. Like, do you think she wants like 7 more kids? It was so funny. So he just has all these questions. But so when they go in to kill the kids, I didn't watch all of this. I just saw kind of the beginning. They're talking to the kids, and the kids are real assholes. They're like, "Our dad's Job. You're not gonna fucking do anything to us. Fuck you." Like basically. So I think they might decide to kill the kids anyway. It's pretty funny, but they're all older. They're like brats, and they think they're untouchable. And it kind of blows my mind because you have this guy Job who's like devout to God, gives everything to God, but because of that, and he's so well known, now his kids are just you know, uh, they're just taking everything for granted, right? And they're just
Yeah.
acting like, oh, you can't touch us. Our dad's Job. So I kind of went off a little over Sharon rant there, but I think it's hilarious because even the angels and demons don't know what the real plan is, right? They all want to know like this is what's going to happen. We're going to win the war, and when it doesn't go that way, they get all flustered and they don't know what to do and they like freak out. Now, just imagine people, right? It's the same thing. We want to have control because we're afraid, and if we don't have control, if we don't know that we're going to get sucked out by the rapture when it happens at the end of the world, and we're going to be just fine. If we don't have that knowing, then we're going to have fear. Well, what's going to happen? What if the world ends? What if a big mudslide happens? What if, mud floods are real? And it's like, well, I guess we're just going to have to deal with it as we go with it. You know,
Yeah.
Nobody likes that answer though. Like, what do you mean? Like, well, I guess we're just gonna have to see what happens. But I'm looking out my window right now and it's beautiful. There's no mud flood going on. It's everything's
My
great.
skies are blue and clear and beautiful.
That's right. So I should just live now and enjoy it, because if that does happen, the mud flood, the Phoenix event, whatever, the world whole shift happens, anything like that happens, I'm gonna be like, fuck, I should have enjoyed my time when it was great. Now I'm just like in misery, and I don't even have good memories to look back on. I was just worried the whole time that this was gonna happen, and it did. Um Again,
Right.
not that it's bad to be prepared or anything, but I really think that, I always use this example of, and I'll let you talk after this, I promise, Sharon. It just
No
But I
worries.
use the example of Y2K. In 1999, my mom's friend, who was real nice guy, born again Christian, super nice guy. He passed away in 2020, unfortunately. But he was telling me of all these things you'll hear on truther channels now. He's like, about the grocery stores, and they could be empty within like a few days, and like all this stuff can happen, and if the grid goes down, and so I've been having these worries or thoughts in my head. It's been 22 years now, 20, what, 99. So it's been 25 years now. After a while, if you don't figure it out that you just got to live your life and do your best and do what you can, then you're just going to get stressed out to the max. And that's why I'm really not surprised why things are the way they are, especially in 2024 with presidential election coming up. And I guess this could bring us into it. But that's what a lot of people or truthers or whatever be like, why is everybody so freaked out, or why are they going along with it, or why do they believe it? It's like, well, we've been steeped in this stuff for so long. It's just like a lifestyle. And it's funny how back then people didn't want to hear about it, but now everyone's talking about, like, or in 2020 at least, they were talking about like empty shelves in grocery stores and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I could just keep blabbing forever. What do you think, Sharon?
Yeah. No worries. It started all off with the quote that you read.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to let go of the pictures of what you thought it would be like and
Here, I'll
learn to
bring it.
find joy in the story you are actually living. Rachel Marie Martin. And when I first read it, I had to read it a couple of times because, you know, the picture of what, or the pictures of what you thought it would be like. And I'm like, wait, let me read that again, because it sounded like too many words. But then
Yeah,
as I tried to break it down, I was like, oh no, it's fine. I was like,
I
wait, are
had
there
to
too
read
many
it a
words
few
in there?
times so I knew I'd get it right on the show. Because when I was reading it, I kept tripping. And normally I'll just go with it live. But I'm like, I better read this one a few times. I'm gonna screw it up.
We're doing it live. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking exactly. I was thinking of Bill O'Reilly earlier. I was thinking exactly that. Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Yeah. So, but yeah, letting go of what you thought it would be like, what you think the future will be like, and just be here now, like Ram Dass says. Richard Alpert. I was listening to Audible. He has one called Experiments in Truth. And I know you and I listened to the other one that's called A Love, Devotion, and Service, or something like that. I always forget.
Yeah,
Which
the
I
my
love.
vehicle.
I love that one. But started I started listening to Experiments in Truth kind of again because it's the first time I'm going through it, but I had started it and only got a little bit in, and then I just, for whatever reason, I was like, it was not vibing with me at that moment. So I was like, okay, whatever, I'll just go back to the other one for now. And recently I got back into Experiments in Truth, and I'm really enjoying it. And he was, in this particular portion I was listening to this morning, he's talking about Bhagwan Das, this guy that he was hanging out with. And I'm
That's
guessing
me.
he's, yeah, the 6'7" guy. And
Yeah.
I guess he's the guy who introduced him to Maharaji. I'm guessing, because he hasn't said that yet, but I'm assuming, duh, like this is the story. Um, but anyway, he's talking about him and how he's hanging out with this guy. And this guy's like younger than him. He's like in his 20s. And he's like, he's already this, like, quote, holy man walking around India. And he's an American, and blonde hair, long blonde hair and long blonde beard, I guess, from what he describes. And I'd never heard of him up until listening to this now, actually. But anyway, um, he keeps trying to tell him stories, like to pass the time. And he's like, oh, did I ever tell you about the time? And Bhagwan Das says to him, can you just be here now? Like, don't worry about the past. Can you just be here now? And then he's like, okay. And then he tries to tell him about something, and his ideas about something in the future. And he's like, don't worry about the future. Can you just be here now? So that was in my head. So it's pertinent to this quote. It's perfect, actually. Learn to find
Yeah,
joy in the story you are actually living.
it's so true because a lot of people, most people, don't want to be exactly where they're at, or they want to be something else. They want to be somewhere else, be someone else, where they're working towards something and working toward a goal, and they're like, as soon as I get this, I'm gonna be great. And that reminds me of people I know that are like want to be retired. Right? You were talking about this before we started recording, where people are like, oh, I just can't wait to be retired. Once I'm retired, everything's going to be great. It's just like when you're in school, like once I graduate high school, it'll be great. Then I join the Marines. Once I get out of the Marines, then I got to get it. Then I face a reality and I got to get a job. And I'm like, oh man, well, once I get that job and I'm doing well and I master it, I'll be great. And then when I learned how to DJ, once I become a good MC and I can do weddings and parties on myself, it'll be perfect. It'll all be peaches and cream. And not that my life's been bad or anything. I've had I can't complain at all. But now that I'm living more in the present, I'm like, oh, because I feel like what happens, and this is something I said to my lovely woman, Elizabeth, a lot. Sometimes if she's not happy with her job or whatever, we talk about situations where we might want to move somewhere or what we want to do. We're not sure. We're still trying to figure it out. Right. And I tell her, I'm like, look, these are the good times. Like you're going to look back on these times and be like, remember when we were living in that house with the cats and it was so great and you used to rub my feet or whatever it was. I'm like, that's what you're going to say. You're going to say that in the future. So why don't you just say it now? Like I've had to have this conversation with myself so many times, and this is another thing I say all the time. And I probably said on the show where it's like, how we say, oh, we'll look back on this one day and laugh. Like if a situation happens and it's kind of awkward or sad or whatever, we're like, well, we'll look back. It just said my connection's unstable. Am I freezing? No, I'm good. Okay. It says that every once in a while. Yeah, but I'll be like, one day we'll look back on this and laugh. And I'm like, well, why not just laugh now? If the comedy's there, if the humor's there. And I think the reason why we don't laugh now is because of our ego, or we think it should be a certain way. And when it falls short, then we get upset and then we become victimized by this occurrence, whatever it was. And we feel like victims. And then we feel like we have to act accordingly. And it's funny because it's like being at a restaurant and they get your order wrong or they screw something up. I used to get all upset about it, be like, oh man, they screwed up my order. I want something free. I want this, I want that. Now I'm just like, all right, I guess I'm just eating this now. This is great, unless it's something really bad or whatever, or it just tastes gross or whatever. But if it's something manageable, I'm just like, oh, this is awesome.
You got
And
to try something you weren't expecting to try.
yeah, you really don't know, right? You're
You
like,
get
oh, I
to
guess
test
it's
your
kind.
reactions
Yeah,
to
and
different things.
it reminds me, yeah, 100%. That happens a lot too because when I'm DJing weddings and stuff, usually they just kind of give me whatever they have to eat. A lot of times, I'll get a choice or whatever, and I get the meal. But some venues are just like, here, we got this food. What do you want? So, um, but being that I was in the Marine Corps and stuff helps also because I was at times where you're just eating whatever. You're like, all right, this is edible. Uh, but what was I
Baked
saying?
beans.
Oh, I forget now. Baked beans. Yeah,
Well,
beans. The three beans: bullets, band-aids, and beans.
Okay. That's a thing,
Uh-oh, am
huh?
I frozen or are you frozen?
No,
Okay,
I'm
we're good.
I'm not seeing anything frozen. Well, I was just going to comment on your discussion about the whole like when I retire and when I
Oh yeah,
used to
yeah.
work in the corporate, world, I would hear a lot of people say this all the time. And I wondered if I would ever feel that way because I just felt like I just enjoyed every moment and I didn't like work was just the thing I did and that's where I was and I made the best of it that I could. And I but other people around me were just like I can't wait to retire and dare I say who's retired now before they are. I don't know why, but I'm here. And I
Yeah.
I guess I never did experience that moment of, you know, I can't wait to be retired. And maybe that's why I'm here.
Yeah, I tell people I'm like, well, I'm kind of partially retired. Like I'll work and then I have some time off and I work on other things. It's hard for people to understand, but I tell them like I didn't start DJing until I was like in my mid 30s, mid or early 30s. I'm like I worked. I was in the Marines and I worked in the car business. I like worked my butt off the first part of my life. So uh, how dare you? But I think it's just something that's ingrained in our culture. And bringing it back to we were going to say something about 2024 in this election cycle, which I have no idea. I don't even know if Trump is still running or I just don't even care. I did see that there was an Indian guy that everyone was talking about. And the what I look at though is the behavior. Everybody kind of just knows this is what you're supposed to talk about. So this is what we talk about now. It's the thing with the voting, which is funny, it's weird too, because they make it seem like it's your duty, right? Like it's your dharma. And this is something that goes with the Tao. It's like you must vote. If you don't vote, you're not a good American or whatever. And
And they try to make you feel good about by saying it's your right. No, not really. It's my
it's your
choice.
right.
It's
Yeah.
my choice to do or not do.
You're not exercising your freedom when you don't vote for your slave master.
Yes.
Didn't you know that?
It's such BS.
And but I think it's funny because though all this comes back to people not being okay with the way the world is, right? Most politicians that are running on some kind of platform of change. The person who came before you was terrible. That's what it's been like for the past few elections. I mean, we had like, back in the 80s, you had Reagan, and then Bush was like, oh, we're going to have more of this. And everyone's, it's great. But then once Clinton got in there, everyone's like, fuck this. So it just, the meter just keeps going back and forth. And what we're going to talk about today is, could it be possible that there is nothing wrong with the world? Is the way that it is. Like if you looked at a wood chipper, if you were a squirrel on a tree and you looked at a wood chipper, someone cutting down a tree and throwing it into this machine that just turns wood into chips, you'd be like, that thing is horrible. That thing is the worst invention ever. It's terrible. But for people, if you had a tree that fell in your yard, and you didn't know how to get rid of it or didn't know what to do with it, it's actually a great invention, right? Like, oh, this thing is perfect. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And that's kind of how I feel what the world is. The world is like a giant wood chipper, and it's gonna
Royal.
take the oiled. And what it does is, now instead of chopping or chipping up wood, it chips up your idea of how you think it should be, and it turns it into what reality really is.
What would a woodchuck do if a
So,
woodchuck could chuck wood? Is that the tongue twister?
how much wood would a woodchuck? How much
Chuck
wood could a woodchuck
could
chuck
chuck
if a
if a
woodchuck
woodchuck
could
could
chuck
chuck wood.
wood?
That's
Yeah.
right. That's what it was. But lest we forget that I was going to pull an I Ching card,
Yes, pull a card. I'll check the chat, see if anything's going
the 51 shock. See that?
on. Tony says 2024, the year of the wood dragon. Yes, we're gonna throw the dragon into the wood chipper this year. We're gonna see what happens.
Nice. So yeah, shock. And I was just thinking about how it relates to what we're talking about too.
Hey, what's up, Nigel?
Thunder above, thunder below. Oh, welcome, Nigel. I will read from 51 in the book. It says, one hears thunder unexpectedly. First comes fear, then a sharpened vision. Recall a close brush with danger, a falling branch, a barely avoided automobile accident, an escape from a violent confrontation. Such incidents arouse every nerve in your body, perhaps in a brief wave of panic. But soon, once the danger has passed, the initial reaction gives way to heightened awareness. The same process occurs with other types of shock: the loss of a job, the death of a loved one, the failure of a business, and so on. The lasting impact of a major shock can be stimulating or debilitating, depending on your perspective. The critical factor is a willingness to be open to fear rather than running away from it, enabling you to transform anxiety into laser sharp perception. Isn't that what we've been talking about? Crazy. There can be a positive side to shock. When overtaken by crisis, the wise look within and search their hearts for strength to face the world with courage. Courage can mean daring to take the unexpected path, to bounce back quickly after failure, or to have faith in the meaning of life when confronted with great loss, even death. We tend to think of shock only in terms of unpleasant events. We can also be jarred, however, by the release of tension that comes with unexpected success. To keep your bearings in the aftershock of either trauma or victory, it is essential that your inner compass be aligned with the magnetic force that guides you toward fulfillment of your deepest desires and your highest destiny. That reminds me of Bashar. Prepare yourself to take some jarring surprise in stride. Meditate a little bit to find your center. A calm reaction to the losses and gains that may arise will help you surmount these shocks to your system. Wow. Very timely, I think, because we always talk about
I like
fear,
that because
about reactions. We were talking about that earlier. Perceptions or reaction to an event. So I felt that was quite apropos.
anxiety, we talk about all the time, all these things, shock. And Nigel said something cool in the chat. He said, hi. And he said, Phil said, without the disturbance in the world, what would get mankind to take the next step in conscious self evolution? In other words, a gift from the creator is what we are resisting. And he said, shocks provide the energy to do the work. Gurdjieff suggested this. Shock brings the unconscious purpose to regain the non-disturbed state. To regain the there's always this heart in the way. It's weird. There we go. To regain the non-disturbed state up in order to gain pleasure and escape pain, to be free from experience by struggling, striving, etc.
Indeed.
Yeah,
It's funny. I was just going to quickly say it's funny he mentioned Gurdjieff because I was looking at some stuff about Ram Dass and he always mentions Gurdjieff and I'd never seen it spelled. And so at some point I was reading something today and I saw the name and I was like, oh, that's how you spell Gurdjieff. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I think Nigel spelled it incorrectly, but yeah, it's close. I'm sure it was like a quick typo, you know.
Yeah, close enough. I would have had no idea how to spell it either. I've heard him talked about actually. And I'm like, man.
Yeah. I don't even know how I would spell it. Yeah. It's Gurdjieff. George Ivanovich Gurdjieff, mystic, philosopher, teacher.
Ivanovich, is that with much an E?
Ivanovich, Ivan.
Oh, so his initials are Gig.
Oh, nice. Yes, they are. Good call. Greco-Armenian mystic and philosopher. And I didn't know really anything about him, so that's cool. Thanks.
When did he live? Does it say?
It says born around 1877 and died in 1949. near Paris.
Buddy.
But he was born in Alexandropol, Armenia, Russian Empire.
So. The fort, that must have been rough in the fort. Oh no, in the early 1800s.
I meant to look up Gurdjieff, so thank you, Nigel, for the reminder.
We know. And remember to stay tuned to the end of this episode because we're going to read the last part of what it says about the card that Sharon just pulled.
Yeah. And welcome to anyone who's listening now because we have a few more that joined. So.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for checking us out. Today, we're going to be talking about the Tao. So I guess I can pull it up. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
I would say as you pull that up,
please do.
That this is one of the quotes that Brandon loves to quote all the time. And it was one of the first quotes that I ever really knew about the Tao because of Brandon and his telling me that the world was perfect just as it was before I was ever able to grasp the concept of that being the case. So this is a beloved verse for us both.
Yeah. Ooh, look at how short the Dwight Goddard version. That's all right. I like it. Okay. So we're going to do like we do always. We read, we have 4 different versions of the Tao. We're going to read them now. This verse anyway. Verse 29 from the Stephen Mitchell version from 1988. Do you want to improve the world? I don't think it could be done. The world is sacred. It can't be improved. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. The master sees things as they are without trying to control them. She lets them go their own way and resides at the center of the circle.
Very nice. Dwight Goddard from 1919. Not forcing things. Wu Wei. One who desires to take and remake the empire will fail. The empire is a divine thing that cannot be remade. He who attempts it will only mar it. He who seeks to grasp it will lose it. People differ. Some lead, others follow. Some are ardent, others are formal. Some are strong, others weak. Some succeed, others fail. Therefore, the wise man practices moderation. He abandons pleasure, extravagance, and indulgence.
Nice. All right. And after we're finished reading these, everybody, we're going to break them down if you're new to this series. All right. From the Stan Rosenthal 1984 version of the Tao, it's verse 29 is entitled, Taking No Action. The external world is fragile, and he who meddles with it, its natural way risks causing damage to himself. He who tries to grasp it thereby loses it. It is natural for things to change, sometimes being ahead, sometimes being behind. There are times when even breathing may be difficult, whereas its natural state is easy. Sometimes one is strong and sometimes weak, sometimes healthy and sometimes sick. Sometimes is first and at other times behind. The sage does not try to change the world by force, for he knows that force results in force. He avoids extremes and excesses and does not become complacent. Yeah.
Aleister Crowley, 1920s, refraining from action. He that, desiring a kingdom, exerteth himself to obtain it, will fail. A kingdom is of the nature of spirit, and yieldeth not to activity. He who grasps it destroys it. He who gains it loses it. The wheel of nature revolves constantly. The last become first, and the first last. Hot things grow cold, and cold things hot. Weakness overcomes strength, things gained are lost anon. Hence, the wise man avoids effort, desire, and sloth.
Ooh, can't wait to break
Yeah.
that one down.
Yeah, I know.
Let's bring it back to us real quick for a minute. Now, I see like a common theme going along these, obviously, as we always do, but it really is kind of like the essence of what we talk about all the time on the show.
Oh my gosh.
So this one, guys, like this one is going to be the one to watch. Because it really, has nothing to do with what you think or want, right? All right, so let's do the first part here. Do you want to improve the world? I don't think it can be done. Now, I like this because he's asking a question and he's making a statement, but he's not sure. He's like, I don't think it can be done.
True.
So he's not making a declarative statement like it definitely can't be changed. He's just like, I don't know, man. I don't think it can be done.
Yeah.
The world is sacred. It can't be improved, which is now he's making a declarative statement, which is, you can't. The world is sacred. You can't improve it. If you tamper with it, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I'm just laughing because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just so poignant.
If you
That's
tamper with it, you'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it. And that part is so important because that's really like anything. If you objectify it, if you put it on a pedestal, even you could say, or if you objectify men or women or whatever it is, you'll lose it. And it doesn't mean, say you're a guy and you want to date like the hottest woman that you could find, and you find her, and you're like, oh, I got this really hot girlfriend. So you're objectifying her and you still have her with you, but the thing is you're not getting the full beauty out of the experience. Because I've known friends that have dated very attractive women just because they're attractive and they didn't really have a lot in common with them, and it could be hell, right? If you're going to be with somebody you don't have a lot in common, you don't see the world the same way, you're just sticking together because of physical appearance and attributes, you're going to lose it, right? You're not going to get the
absolutely.
whole gist of what a relationship could be. And that's just one small example, really. The same thing with
Yeah.
the world. If you objectify it, if you want it to be what you want it to be when you look out the window, then you're going to lose the whole purpose, the whole meaning behind what this is.
Yeah. Good points. I will read the Dwight Goddard one and then we'll comment on that.
All right. Go ahead.
So, in this first part of verse 29, Dwight says, one who desires to take and remake the empire will fail. Fall is probably a good one too. The
Yeah.
empire is a divine thing that cannot be remade. He who attempts it will only mar it. He who seeks to grasp it will lose it. And I mean, like, what can you say? I guess I see when the word empire kind of gives it another different perspective too, because you think of this ruler, or you think of this kind of rulership, or this like kingdom or whatever. And I know that we on this platform, on this channel, and just as friends too, we talk about the yes and no of things, right? So like the way I see this is, okay, yes, you can make and remake your life. You can create your own reality, right? But that's not what I don't think that's what this is trying to say. I think it's trying to say that when you see this world as imperfect and you think you can be the savior and you have this ego about it, that's exactly what I think that's exactly what this world is about, is to show you that ego that you can't do this. You cannot.
No matter how hard you try, right?
Yeah. It's like the empire is a divine thing that cannot be remade. It is. I mean, we are all divine beings. We're all, no matter who it is. I don't care if it's the people that are the powers that think they be or whatever, um, they are all divine too. Like we all have a divine spark. And I know we've talked about this before, I think, on the Mandela Effect episode, because we talked about NPCs and whatnot. But like, yeah, you can think to yourself, oh, those people are NPCs. You know, they're evil, they're XYZ. Like you can put a label on them, you can put them in a box. But
Sheeple.
yeah, um, but in the end, they're all divine beings like we are. And I think the point of this realm is to experience that. And despite all the negativity and positivity and everything you experience in the world, can you see that they are your brother and your sister? And no, you don't have to agree with them on everything. And they may be acting in a way that's, quote, insane, in a way that's not sane, in a way that doesn't make sense. But that doesn't mean that they're not divine. It doesn't mean that they're not also experiencing this beautiful realm just like you and me. And that the creative spark, the divine source is at the root of each and every one of us. Sorry, I'm just
No,
thinking
don't
out
be.
loud here.
It's definitely true. And let me tell you, it's not like they make it easy. These people don't make it easy for you to love them, but that's the best part, right? It's more of a challenge when people are, and it doesn't mean you got to go around and be everyone's friend, hang out with everyone. Everyone has their own dharma. Really, all it means is that you don't have to think that you're a victim because of the actions of everyone else. Everyone else is covering their smiling face, so they're making it hard for me to not cover my smiling face. Well, that's just your opinion, man. No, that's your challenge, right? It's like, well, that's like your challenge now, man. You gotta do that. And I like how they in this verse he uses the word empire. I'm guessing that maybe back when this was written, there was probably a Chinese empire going on, and that's why they use those words. And if you think about it, if you were part of this empire back then, you were just this, nice Chinese person, and you didn't like the way that things are. This is kind of telling you, listen, you can't just destroy and remake this empire like it's divine, because the way that they believe that their emperors ruled, it was like a divine thing, right? They were chosen from God, just like the pharaohs, all these
Well, and
all
just
these
like
systems of
King
government.
Henry the Eighth or whatever, divine right to rule and stuff. I'm like, right. Mm.
Yeah, it all goes back to like the pharaohs, basically, like the pharaonic dynasty. They talk about that in Dune too. It's really cool. There's this character who in God Emperor Dune, spoiler alert, he lives for like 3,500 years, and he has all the memories of everyone who's ever existed. And there's this point where he's kind of like talking about the pharaohs and how they screwed everybody. He's like, they're the ones who convinced people that certain people had a divine right to rule or whatever. It's like you're the chosen ruler by God. Um, but anyhow, so getting back to the Chinese, I feel like it's that way, right? It's like you can't change the empire, you can't remake it all by yourself, being one person. But what you could do is fix how you feel about it and how you can exist and how you can live on an everyday basis. Are you going to be a victim in your own mind and how you feel? Are you going to act like a victim, or are you just going to kind of do your own thing?
And by doing that, you're influencing the people around you too, because birds of a feather flock together. So if you start viewing the world in this way, then you start making people go, oh, why is he so happy and in such good spirits? And like if life is so terrible, but like, why is he, and then you influence other people to question things and be like, oh, well, am I really a victim? Do I have to be a victim? Maybe not. But it's funny you mentioned the whole Chinese thing, because yesterday, Cody and I started watching Ip Man, which I'd never seen before. So
Oh, cool. What is it called?
IP, Ip Man, IP
Oh,
Man. Yeah. Allegedly, Cody was telling me he was the guy who was Bruce Lee's mentor or something like that, or trainer or
uh,
something. I don't know if that's true, but
that sounds interesting to
yeah,
say the
it
least.
is. It's, and I think you would like it. If you, I think it's on, I think we're watching it on YouTube right now. It's like free with ads. You can watch it right now. Check
Oh,
it out.
cool. All right.
I think you'll like it because it, you talking about this kind of made me think of that too. But go ahead.
It's so funny that you said free with ads, because some of the stuff we'll watch, it's free with ads, and we'll just mute it or whatever. And it's crazy because the commercials that come on during, I think HBO we have or something. It's like her brother's, and we just use his account, but there's one you could pay for that's less, but you get like commercials a little bit or whatever. So anyway, but the commercials are so bright and loud. It's crazy. They're brighter than the normally just come on, and you're just like, dude. But what
Yes.
it reminds me of is I don't
Something
know,
annoying.
yeah, that too. But I would like to. This is like a premise. I'm not sure how I'm going to make it into a joke, but I feel like what happened in
Don't
2020.
tell the AI. He'll make it first.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
kidding.
Yeah, what happened in 2020 was kind of like a big Vaxzoo commercial, right? An experimental medical serum commercial that just interrupted everybody's life. It's like we were all watching the show called Our Lives, and then 2020 happened, and it's like, all right, hang on, we got this commercial, and then everything stopped for the commercial. Like everything stopped, and we're like, hey, you sure you don't want to get this experimental medical serum? Look at all
Dude,
these people.
dude,
Doesn't it feel like that's what it's like? And
dude.
I think that even people who don't feel like we do about the experimental medical serums, maybe I can word it in such a way. I could just say 2020. I don't even have to say anything about. I could say was like one of those, because that's what it was like. Everything stopped. It's like, oh, you thought you were going to go do this? Nope, you're going to watch this commercial. It's on every channel. Everyone's talking about it.
Indeed.
And people like me were like, yeah, but is there any proof? Do you have any? Can you show me a picture of what you're talking about? This little virus sue, whatever.
Or
Yeah,
it's just a commercial. Doesn't
it's just a
I don't
commercial.
have to listen to it.
I just
I
muted
can
it.
mute it, you know?
I went outside and just went in the woods.
Exactly.
The woods were open, but I think that's a pretty plausible premise to make people laugh. I just have to figure out how I'm going to make it into an actual joke instead of explaining all those things. But yeah,
Don't
it'll be
explain the
there.
joke. Just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah. You don't want to. You're just gonna be like, you guys remember that commercial?
That was called 2020.
Everybody knows the commercial. Yeah, it's called. It just, how commercials just stop everything. Anyway, all right, we're stopping the show. Okay, so what's up, chat? Nigel's getting it. I love it. Phil said the hardest ones to love need the most. Yeah, it's so
Need it the
true.
most.
Need it the most. Oh, what's up, Blue? Thank you. Nice job, Brandon. Thank you, thank you. Um, yeah, I feel like I don't even know what I was gonna say. Anyway, we'll get back into the Dow, but there is just so much comedy everywhere to be had. And I told some of this recently. I'm like, yeah, I kind of stopped doing comedy like around 2020. I'm like, everything got shut down. And I'm like, reality was funnier than I could even, what am I gonna? And they just started laughing. I'm like,
Life became my comedy.
yeah, how am I going to compete with this? I'm like, just turn on the news and people are getting their butts swapped to see if they're sick or something. I was like, what? How can I compete with Waynell Sexton? You know what I mean? That's like not just the name Waynell Sexton, but to put that person on the news and pass it as if they're a real person. Wow. CNN is my favorite comedy network, the Common News Network.
Yes.
All right, no, I don't watch. All right, so
Verse
we were
21.
reading the first part. Yeah, so let's see. I see a common theme going. Dwight Goddard calls it the Empire. Stephen Mitchell calls it the world. Let's see what Stan Rosenthal has to say again, and very, very quickly with this, which is great. The first part, and then he gets a little wordy with the last part.
Yeah.
Sorry, taking no action. The external. Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. Okay, here we go. The external world is fragile, and he who meddles with its natural way risks causing damage to himself. This is great because he talks about the world, but he claims the external, I can't say this world. The
Wild.
external world. There we go. It's all external. Um, so he's talking about outside, right? So there's a clue of how you can fix it. Well, you can't fix the external world. It's fragile. And if you meddle with it in its
Mm-hmm.
natural ways, you risk causing damage to yourself, right? So, but what can you work on? The internal world, which is even
Mm-hmm.
easier to say.
Oh my.
He who
Mm.
tries to grasp it thereby loses it. And that is like, I was it Joe P who said on the show, power is like you open your hand and power comes into it and it flows through. The minute you try to grab it, you lose it though. The minute you try to grab power, you truly lose what it is to have that power. It's the same thing. You can't grasp it. You just gotta, it's like seeing a butterfly, right? You're outside, you're like, look at this beautiful butterfly. Some people, that's the extent. They take a picture, maybe, make it last a while. Other people, they get a net and they capture it and put it in a book so they can always have this beautiful butterfly on their wall, right? It's like, I think you kind of missed the point
Point.
of nature's beauty, you know?
Oh wow.
Even
I'm glad
taking a
you.
picture of it, you could say,
Yeah,
sorry, but even taking a picture, you, again, I do this all the time. I have pictures of butterflies, but even taking a picture, one can argue saying that, you're just trying to live in the past, you know,
right.
be
Well,
in the
as
future.
long as you know what you're doing and your intention behind it. If you took the picture because, every once in a while you want to look back at that beautiful butterfly that you saw, um, but you have no attachments you know, to it. But if that's it, that's your butterfly, and you put it on the wall, you look at it every day and you praise the butterfly, you know. Um, but I was gonna say
Yep.
I'm
I
glad
think
you.
you just summed up the whole Tao right there in that simple little sentence. It's all about attachment, right? It's not even you want to fucking go do heroin, great, but it's about the attachment, right? It's like are you gonna get stuck in your room doing heroin every day now and robbing and destroying your life? Or are you just gonna
Dude,
go out and party once a month to do heroin, Like I'm not gonna judge you.
dude, that
Maybe
is
that's
like,
a bad example, but
well, it's funny because the experiments in Truth Audible that I'm listening to by Ram Dass, he's talking about, he doesn't, I don't remember him saying the word attachments, but he's talking about that. His, he was experimenting with taking LSD along with the other people he was with in the university scene and whatnot. And
Harvard.
yeah. And then he was like talking about how he went to India and he took his little bottle of LSD with him because just in case he could give it to some people out there and maybe they would tell him, what is this and what is this all about? And like, instead of just letting it be what it is. I'm just paraphrasing for him, but so anyway, it's funny that you said that because it reminded me of that.
He's also said things before, like if you're going to go out and get drunk, go out and get drunk righteously. He's like, don't be worried about, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. And that really is the key to living in the moment. And that's why I love the Tao, because there really aren't sins. They're just suggestions. They're like, listen, this is what the master does. If you want to go fucking do that, go ahead. It's fine. But this is what the master does, like,
Nice, yeah.
and I
um
feel like all these sense pleasures are here for us to experience if that's part of our plan or whatever, part of our dharma, right? So again, no judgments, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
um so I was going to say I'm glad you mentioned the external world, this external because it and now I've lost my train of thought because I don't remember what I was going to say after that. But it really made me think of something. Because I was thinking about, it's the internal that you want to change, right? Not the external, because you can be like, I'm going to change the world, and gather all these people. Okay, I remember what I was going to talk about. So, those movements that are kind of going on right now, the lawful sovereign people type movements.
Yep.
And this is in the external, right? You think, oh, the current regime, the current uh system isn't working. So we're going to take it upon ourselves, and we're going to make a new system, a better system. It's going to work, you know, because we can do it better. And all I've ever seen come from that is just more confusion, the same kind of stuff going on, like a cult, bickering and fighting over stupid things, and no real change, not real true change. You know what I mean? Only external change, which isn't true change, because true change comes from inside. It's internal, it's within. Has what you've learned about that external system, has it helped you go within and comprehend what's going on there, so you can heal that and be better at that? I think only then could you maybe um, have a better idea for things. But even then, you know, just you and a couple other people, like, it's really going to take more than that. It's going to take a lot of people whose lives are being inwardly changed to make a huge effect on stuff. So I don't know.
Could it be that what it's going to take is a giant commercial in 2020, like planes crashing into a thing, just ridiculousness at the top and just a clown world? Is that what it needs for people to like wake up and be like, I just don't want to be a part of this anymore, and fix themselves? So it could even be argued, and other people have argued this, that these people at the top are doing this on purpose to try to wake people up. The more ridiculous they make it, it's just like if you went to someone's house and they just kept doing ridiculous things, like, here, have this, and they hand you something to drink, and it's like, like shoe polish or something. You're like, what the hell's going on here? But it's like, you're the one who came here and you're putting up with this. You know what I mean? You could leave anytime you want, man. So yeah, I feel
Mm.
like if you are going to have a group of people that get together, and you want it to like not turn into a cult, the best way to do it is to form it around like things like self-improvement and working on yourself, right? And you can't really
And
have somebody
humility,
that's at
and
the
not
top.
thinking, you're the be all end all, your cult is the be all end all.
Yeah. And you could have maybe like a spokesperson or somebody, whatever. But if you have a leader or somebody that is the boss, I think, again, that's where it goes wrong too, because then
Mm-hmm.
it's all
Mm-hmm.
about, you're seeking, and this just, you could even look at this in the lens of a Christian mindset, where if somebody is the leader of the focus, then the focus isn't on God anymore. That's a good way to put it. Like some of these churches, churches, focus isn't on God. And it's the same thing, right? If you're just going to think of God as like you're either your higher self or something you're a part of, the creator, if you're focusing on everything that's wrong and you're just focusing on that all day, you're really not doing yourself any service. I feel like you're just causing more suffering for yourself, because every day you wake up and you're like, look at everything, everyone else is wrong, look at all these terrible things. But what we don't realize, and we say this all the time, is sometimes people have to go through this. Sometimes they have to take all these experimental medical serums and cover their smiling
That's
faces or whatever it is
exactly,
until they see it and they're just like, oh, this is
exactly.
funny. Maybe sometimes they never will. But again, that's not up to us, because I feel like, again, from the lens of a Christian thing, it's like Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, right? Like it's not up to you to make judgments and to judge other people
Mm-hmm.
in that way. If you want to judge their behavior to see if you want to hang out with them or not, or whatever, that's one thing. But to sit there and just point the finger at them and
Mm-hmm.
say that they're the bad one and everything I'm doing is great, it's the same trap.
Yeah. I'm reading a book right now because I finished. You were talking earlier about attachments, and I was going to say I finally finished reading The Five Levels of Attachment by Don Miguel Reese Jr. I don't know why I always have a hard time remembering his name.
I want to say Don Juan.
I know sometimes I do too, but I that was really good. Highly recommend it. It was only 99 cents on Kindle when I got it. It should still be that. But I started reading his brother's book, Don Jose. um, and one of his books is called Wisdom of the Shamans. And what you just said right now, before I started talking, it reminded me of that book. What were you saying? I forgot.
He's talking about judging people and pointing the finger
Oh,
and stuff.
and thinking that you're trying to convince other people that you're right. And I think he was saying that in the Toltec tradition, that is a conquistador, someone who wants to like conquer and be like telling you how to think, and because my way is the right way and you should think like me. So
that's that's a
I
great
might
example.
I might post a screenshot of some of the pages of that book that I was reading on that part. It was good.
100%. Yeah, you should. We can even talk about that in upcoming episodes too.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's get back to this. Yeah, I learned a lot of this stuff through these books and
Yeah.
audiobooks and stuff, and it just takes a while, really. I mean, for me, it just took me a while to actually embody what they're saying, and it's not like I'm perfect. I mean, we talk about this all the time, Sharon and I do, where sometimes we still like slip up or whatever, but I feel like the key is if you find yourself judging somebody, just don't be mad at yourself. Don't judge yourself for judging others. It's like being mad because you got mad. You're trying not to get mad, then you get mad, and it makes you mad. It's like all right.
Endless
So
cycle.
you can read the Aleister Crowley version. There's something in here I want to talk about too. I'm excited about it.
Did you read the Stan Rosenthal version? And
Yeah.
totally
Oh, maybe I
spaced.
didn't finish it. The external world is fragile, and he who meddles with its natural way risks causing damage to himself. He who tries to grasp it thereby loses it. Yeah, I did read it.
Okay. All right. Aleister Crowley calls this refraining from action. Stan Rosenthal calls it taking no action. And Dwight Goddard calls it not forcing things. Wu Wei. Yes. This is the essence of the Tao, basically. This verse is pretty much like the essence of the Tao, I think, so far. All right. I would say he who, desiring a kingdom, exerteth himself to obtain it will fail. A kingdom is of the nature of spirit, and yieldeth not to activity. He who graspeth it destroyeth it, and he who gaineth it loseth it. Oh my God. That's why the first time I read it, I didn't read the F's. So again, here Aleister is using the word kingdom. Stan Rosenthal's using the word world, just as Stephen Mitchell uses world. And Dwight Goddard was using empire. So kingdom, empire, same thing. Aleister Crowley and Dwight were kind of on the same wavelength on this. Yeah, so he who's desiring a kingdom and exerts himself to obtain it will fail. And I mean, yeah, can you say I'm going to be king someday? Let's just say, and let's say that, you do become some quote king of some kingdom. That's not success necessarily. right? It is a spiritual thing, because the next thing he says, wow, is a kingdom is of the nature of spirit and yields not to activity. So there you go. A kingdom is of nature of spirit. It's all spiritual.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts
Okay.
on that?
Well, I kind of seeing a deeper layer to this because if you're thinking of what a kingdom is in this physical realm, it's a government, right? A kingdom is a government. And he's saying kingdom is of spirit, which means it's in the mind, right? It's part of the mind, just like what government means, mind control, we all know, right? That's what it is. So you can't do anything physically to obtain the kingdom. You have to win over the minds of the people. You have to get in their mind and say, we need hope and change. And we need to end all these wars. What are you doing? You actually are getting into the spiritual realm when you do that. Spirit is just, I think, a neutral thing. It could be quote unquote good or evil or whatever, right? I mean, we've talked about before how I'll just say it this way: you can work toward the negative or the positive in this realm, in the spirit realm, right? So I feel like that's really what Aleister Crowley is trying to tell you here. It's like if you want a kingdom, if you want to be a king, you can't just go out and use actions. You can't use things that are of this physical world. You can't go around and like shoot and kill a bunch of people and try to like do a coup to take over the government, because even if you do, you're not going to be strong. The people under you are going to resent you, and they're probably going to have a revolution and get rid of you eventually or whatever. It's not going to be a true kingdom in the spirit. Whereas if you go about it in the spiritual sense, and again, this is only just one interpretation of what he's saying right here. But I think to go into it in the spiritual sense, you first have to become a master of your your
Royal.
internal world. Maybe that's how I used to talk in a past life when I was a Libra. I'm like, look at this world, it's crazy. So, I feel like what Alistair is trying to say here, or the interpretation when he's trying to get across to people, is that you can't just physically come in and take something. And Mark Passio has talked about this before, where he talks about different concepts. How he talks about the realm of cause and the realm of effects, and that's kind of the same thing. The realm of cause could be looked at as a spiritual, and the effects realm could be looked at the physical. So we're seeing things as they play out, but you can't go ahead in this physical and just run and try to stop something with your body, no matter how hard you try. If it's already in the spiritual, it's just going to wash you over. You're going to fail, right? So you have to get into the spiritual realm. And if you want to do this externally and just try to change everyone else spiritually, it's not going to work unless you are right with your spiritual alignment inside. And again, this works for negative and positive. I think that's how a lot of these psyops or whatever that happen in the world. This is how they come to fruition, because maybe if there are architects that are controlling the world or whatever, they have this alignment inside. Maybe it's negatively working, but they are accomplishing what they want in the physical because they're starting with the spiritual. And it's the same thing, right? You have to, I feel like, if you want to create good in this world or whatever, you have to go inside and get the spiritual balance right, and then your creation is going to be what you want it to be in this physical realm. So I think that was huge. The first time when you just read it earlier in the show, the first time you read it, I was like, oh, I got excited, because he's like, yeah, I'm gonna bring it back up. He says, the kingdom is of the nature of spirit
Mm-hmm.
and yieldeth not to activity. That line right there, I loved it. Oh, I forgot to highlight these. There it is right there. That's the key. Yieldeth not to activity. So anything in the spirit realm, you can't use physical means to affect it, right? Now, I mean, I guess it could be argued that you could use physical things like meditation and certain exercises.
I was gonna say that, but go ahead.
Yes, yes. So that's different. But really, what you're doing though by doing
Is
meditating,
you're stopping the action.
meditating. You do your meditating good. When you meditate, you're training your spiritual world. You're working on it, right? So it's not the actual meditation that's doing anything. Just like the push-ups
It's the
when you're trying to get
stopping
in
of all
shape.
the crazy activity in your mind
Yeah, yeah.
and
And
action because you're sitting still.
yes, and also you're learning how to operate your mind the correct way. You're learning to be the master of your mind. So when these thoughts come in, that anxiety or fear, whatever it is, you just look at it and you're like, oh, that's just the thought. I can let it go. And then it comes back and you're like, oh, that's just the thought. I can let it go. I was talking about this recently with Elizabeth, and I told her, I'm like, I think that's how I can just go on these crazy trips. Not that I trip a lot or do a lot of, but every once a year, a couple of years, I might do a good mushroom trip. And I feel like that's why I haven't done any freakouts or anything. It's because no matter how deep I go, or even if when I used to eat more edible, cannabis, some people like freak out, and I would just be like, whoa. And it's because of that meditation, I just get back to that. So when these people call it paranoia, right, or whatever it is, bad
Mhm.
trips, when these thoughts come in, I'm able to just label them as thoughts and let them go and be like, hey, let's put some music on, or, hey, let's do this. And it's great. And, yeah, it's all the same. So I feel like you could affect the spiritual with the physical, but it really is just practice, because you might be physically doing something, but also in the spirit world, the spiritual, you're doing a lot more. You're even telling your higher self, or whatever, you're telling your spirit guides, or however you want to look at this, your creator, you're saying, look, I'm taking this time out of my day. I could be doing anything, but I want to work on this stuff. So that's the first thing you're doing. And then the second thing you're doing is actually you're pumping spiritual iron. Instead of doing like push-ups or like curls, you're just letting your attention wander and then bringing it back, and then you let it wander and then you bring it back. So it's just like this exercise, this muscle, I'm sorry, that you're exercising. So I guess that's one way you could kind of use it. It's like a paradox, right? It's just like when you want to get rid of all your desires, but what is that? That's just a desire to get rid of desires. So, but you use that desire to then work on the other desires. We can only work with what we have, type of stuff. So
Yeah. And the part that says he who grasps it destroys it. You could look at that physically and spiritually too. When you, like you said, try to grasp at that butterfly, let's say you try to grab it in your hand. Well, you can't. You destroy it when you do that because you mess up its little wings and you basically are crushing it. So if you try to grasp it, same in the spiritual, you know, these things are attachments, mental attachments that you have. If you grasp at that attachment and you're like, I can't let go of this belief that XYZ, I can't, you know, it that destroys you. It doesn't edify you. It doesn't help you grow. It doesn't help you mature.
exactly. And shout out to chat. What's up, Carrie? How you doing? And Tony said, when were you a Libra? And I typed it in the chat, but it might not make sense. But we always joke about how we might even heard this, how people say your rising sign. So I'm a Libra rising, but your rising sign could have been your sun sign in your past life. Maybe it was something that you had to overcome or work you had to do. So that's why I say my past life I was a Libra, talking funny.
Leo rising here.
Yeah, and she's a Libra now. Libra, Libra sun sign. I mean,
Maybe
that's
I'll
what,
be a Cancer next, or maybe I won't come back.
who knows.
Who knows? But
Oh,
yeah,
it's
so
flurries, a little bit of snow out there today, in
hmm.
good old northern Milford, good old northern Connecticut today. Nice.
You were saying Milford? You're not in
Yeah.
Milford.
I almost said northern Milford. I know it comes from a long time of being from Milford.
Yes. For many, many years.
All right, let's
You
see.
want to read Stephen Mitchell's second part, verse
Yeah, I'll
29?
bring it up. That's what I'm doing. Share it. Overshare screen. That should be an option. Okay, so we're going to read the second part here. From Stephen Mitchell, 1988. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. I love that part. I'm just going to have to stop here and just because this all has to do with fear and
Mm,
anxiety, right? If you know that there is a time for being safe and a time for being in danger, then you won't have to worry about if the danger is going to come because we all know it's going to come sometime. Like you were saying earlier in that I Ching quote you read about a near accident or when something, maybe a car accident that almost happened, and it didn't
yeah.
happen. It's that same type of thing. We're always, you could argue that anytime you're in a car, you're in danger. Except with Sharon, she's a great driver. I'll choose her as my driver anytime.
Oh, thank you.
But yeah, it's so true that this whole thing about fear and anxiety, when we've talked about this at length on episode 93 with Nick, check that out, where you're just causing this condition to yourself mentally, a condition of maybe fight or flight or whatever it is. And it's because we don't grasp that there is a time for safety and a time for danger. So if you know it's the time for safety, you could just let go and be like, all right, cool. Everything's cool right now. And when that danger time comes, I'll be ready. Because you can argue, wouldn't you be, if you were worried about something happening, like over worried about it, and you were just letting it affect everything, I think you wouldn't be as prepared for the danger. Whereas if you kind of just take things as they come, then you're going to be a lot more prepared. So when things get out of hand, you can react in the moment.
Right, because you're more calm. You're not already hyped up, and you can have
Exactly.
like a response that is rational, perhaps. Um, but yeah, that's that time for being safe and time being in danger, and it it just made me think of some of the uh stories that Cody and I've been listening to about um the Bigfoots and the
Oh
Sasquatches
yeah.
and stuff. Yeah, the interesting stories. And I listen to them, and again, these are stories people tell of what happened, and it's their story. I don't discount it because, who am I to say if they're telling the truth or not? That's their problem. But like I've never experienced that, but I also don't put myself in a place of where I would experience it. It's just like, well, if God wants me to experience something like that, then I'll experience it. And if God doesn't want me to, then I won't. But either way, I'm gonna take it as it comes. If it happens, it happens. And I'll know what I'll do at that moment. I wouldn't say that I'm afraid of it or that I'm worried about it. But some people, I don't know, some people worry and fear those sorts of things. And
Yeah. And
I just quickly, I haven't worked out if the people who are afraid of it are the ones who see it versus the people who aren't. You know what I mean?
yeah, that's a great observation.
I haven't worked that out, but
It kind of brings me back to that show, Good Omens. You and Cody, you should check it out. You probably would really like it.
okay.
Not to give too much away, but there's a character in there who's supposed to be in the first season anyway. He's supposed to be like the son of the devil, and he gets he when he comes to of age, a certain age, everything's supposed to happen, and he's supposed to be able to like control the world and all this stuff. But before that happens, he doesn't know that at all. He's just raised with this random family, and he starts to think about all these different things, and he dreams about them, and then they happen in the world. And it reminds me of the whole thing about how we create our own reality. Like he had a dream about Atlantis or whatever, and then all of a sudden, like on the news, there's like one of the episodes open up and it's just a ship captain, and then they hit this land, and there's this giant landmass in the middle of the Atlantic, and all these people, and it's Atlantis, and it comes up and it's like on the news, and everyone's like, "What the hell?" But it's that same thing where we kind of create our own reality collectively. I guess this guy just had a little more power. Maybe he believed it more or whatever. But they play a little bit with that with the other guy because the demon guy, his name is Crowley, and he there's a part where he also and there's a narrator and the narrator's talking about this situation he has to go through that's tough. He's like going through this whole burning thing with his car. He has to drive through it, but he believes that it's okay. And because he believes it so strongly, he's fine. He just like gets right through it. And it makes me think of what you said with the whole Bigfoot thing. I've often wondered that myself, about Bigfoot or aliens or any of that stuff. Where some people, because I know people that have seen, and heard Bigfoot and seen footprints and stuff where they live like in a mountain in the middle of nowhere. And then I've also talked to people who've seen UFO stuff. I mean, well, we talked to Gordy with that whole thing was crazy, but I have other people in my life that I know that have seen things, and they're credible, sober people. They're not like telling stories about anything else in their life, like everything else
Yeah.
is on track. So I have to believe what they're saying. Yeah, it really makes me wonder who the people are who experience that and see that stuff, and why as well.
Yeah.
But I guess
Maybe
maybe
we
one
could
day
do an
we'll find out.
episode about, thinking about
Yeah,
that
we can
someday.
have somebody on that maybe has had an experience like that too. We can talk about different mindsets that they were in and all that.
Yeah,
All
we were
right, let's get
talking to
done.
as you bring that up, my brother and brother-in-law over the weekend because it was my sister's birthday lunch, and Cody wanted to bring up the topic of, seeing unusual things when hunting because my brother's-in-law is a hunter, and
Oh,
so he said he'd never seen anything unusual necessarily like in the woods or anything like that, but he said he does have family members who have seen UFOs, including his dad and his brother. So, um, you know, then I asked my brother because I knew that my eldest sister had seen a UFO, and I didn't know if my brother had been there when she saw it because he's 4 years younger than her, and he had been there. They were both sitting there on the back of my dad's Rambler and with some neighbor kids and whoever was outside in the yard, whatever, in the front yard, they all saw a UFO come down and just hover and then disappear and go away. I mean, my brother says he was like 4 years old. So,
wow.
yeah.
I feel like stuff like that could exist all around us. We just don't see it, and then maybe sometimes for some reason we do see it. Our perception opens up, and we could see stuff like that. I don't know though. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm like you. I could go either way. Like I think even Ram Dass says he got to a point where he just decided he was going to believe it all, and if it wasn't true, then it's its fault, not. And again, it doesn't mean that you're going to like go invest your life savings into something because it's just internally you're not sitting there judging them, going, "Oh, this guy's a fucking liar. He's full of shit." You're
Yeah.
just more like, "Oh yeah, it's fucking chill, man. Glad I didn't see that. I might have, but yeah, you really never know. I mean, I've heard people tell me stories, and I'm like, I think they're lying, but I've also heard people tell me stories where I'm like, no, I think this might have happened. So you never know.
Yeah.
All right, so I was here. A time for being safe, a time for being in danger. The master sees things as they are without trying to control them. She lets them go their own way and resides at the center of the circle, which I think is huge here with the circle. I know Stephen Mitchell uses the circle a few times in the Tao as like a metaphor, I guess you could say. And really, what it is just a balance, right? You're just staying in the center. You're not going too far to one side, even if you look at it like it's a scale. You're right dead center in the middle. You're not going Republican or Democrat. You're like, I'm just not voting.
Like the
Instagram today asking me, like, are you registered to vote? And I was like, Instagram, what? Like, I don't ask you personal questions, Instagram. Come on.
it's like the circumpunct, which is that the sun in the zodiac symbolism or whatever, with like the circle and then the dot right in the center. That's what it made me think of when you said that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we talk about how like Mario Garza from
Talks
symbolic
about that as
studies.
polar symbolism.
Yeah, he says that's the pole star. And if you think about it, that makes sense because it's a circle and the dot's right in the middle, right? So you're
Center.
staying in the middle. The sun doesn't stay in the middle; it goes everywhere. But yeah, either
Mhm.
way, though, you could look at it that as being in the center of the circle is great. It's great, man.
Yeah, and then let's see. Without trying to control them, she lets them go their own way. It made me think of something. Now I lost my train of thought. All right, no worries.
All right, I'm gonna bring this back up because I want to highlight this. Now, if you look at this whole second part of verse 29 from Stephen Mitchell, he basically just goes with two things, right? A time for being ahead, time for being behind. Motion, rest, vigorous, exhausted, safe, danger. And then he sums it up here. The master sees things as they are without trying to control them. And that's what we talk about all the time. We talk about this need for people to think that they're in control or to think that they know. Because without that knowing, you have to have faith, right? That's really all it is you have faith that things are going to work out how they're supposed to, so you don't worry about it.
Yeah,
She
it
lets
reminded.
them go their I was just going to say she lets them go their own way and resides. Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I realized what it was. Meditation. When you're not trying to control the thoughts that are coming, that you let them go their own way. Like you pretend they're clouds, like passing by. They're just thoughts like clouds, and you just let them pass. That's what it made me think of.
Yeah, I once heard, I think it might have been Headspace. I was using Headspace when I first started which is an app when I first started meditating. And the guy said on there, he goes, just imagine that you're sitting in a chair and you're observing a freeway. Your thoughts are all the cars. He's like, you don't want to run down there in the middle of the freeway and try to stop all these cars. Like you said, you just let them go as they come. You see them and let them go, let them go, let it go. And
Good call.
I feel like that's the key for all this. You just let go when you can.
Mm-hmm.
Try not to hold on to any.
Attachments.
Yeah, you know, we're nailing it.
Indeed.
If there was a
So
Tao college, we would be like the valedictorians. I'm telling you, the College of Tao. Thank God there's not. Yeah, so that's what I'm seeing here with the Stephen Mitchell thing. It's all one or the other, and there's a time for all this. Just like that song by the Birds. To everything, turn, turn. There's a season.
yeah, that's biblical too. The Bible talks about there is a season for
Yeah.
reaping and sowing and XYZ, blah, blah, blah. But
And what
yeah,
is all this? It's just a natural flow of nature, right? We're just trying to
it's
fit in.
just,
Yeah.
like a pendulum
Yep.
swinging. Sometimes
And
it's,
I feel like,
yeah.
and I've heard this also before too, and maybe around us in it, but I feel like most people, and I know I was doing this too, they're just trying to get everything in their life so it's great. You just want everything to be great. I got the best job, I got the best partner, I got the best computer, the best car, all these things, and you want everything to work great and function. And when it doesn't, there's just despair. Oh, my car broke down, or oh, this is happening, or I burnt the food I was trying to cook, and now what am I going to do? All these things. It's like, yeah, you could be upset and go into despair mode, or you could just be like, all right, now what are we going to do? Maybe I'll meet somebody cool at the mechanic shop who's into the Dow. You never know.
Never know. So shall I read the
Yep. I'll
second part?
bring it up here. Boom. There you go.
All right. Verse 29, second part. Dwight Goddard's version. People differ. Some lead, others follow. Some are ardent, others are formal. Some are strong, others weak. Some succeed, others fail. Therefore, the wise man practices moderation. He abandons pleasure, extravagance, and indulgence. And I was just looking at Stephen Mitchell's, and yeah, there's some, you know, similarities like leading and following, being ahead and being behind. But some of the other ones are different, I think. Ardent and formal, let's see, motion and rest, strong and weak. Yeah, there's strong and weak, vigorous, exhausted. And then safe and danger. That's success and failure. Interesting. Interesting.
Mm.
So when you're succeeding, you think you're safe. And when you're failing, you think you're in danger. Interesting.
And I like the way that Dwight puts it here. Therefore, the wise man practices moderation.
Oh, yes. I like that too.
He abandons
That's,
pleasure, extravagance, and indulgence. And again, what did we say before? It doesn't mean that you can't ever have pleasure or extravagance or indulgence. It's just that you're not attached to it and you're not expecting to be every moment of your life to have pleasure. Like you take the pleasure and you when you're in the moment and it's happening, you enjoy it. But you don't sit there and go, I wish this will last forever. Oh, this is the best. And then when it goes away, you're like, oh, you're
yeah.
just setting yourself up for failure, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like growing up, because I was aware that I was a Libra, it was something that my family we talked about, that whole astrological stuff. Um, and so I knew I was a Libra, and the balance, right? And the moderation. So that was something that I always kind of resonated with. And I would say that word often, moderation. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I feel like moderation really is key. Like they say, everything in moderation,
Hmm.
especially moderation. Sometimes you gotta. All
Yes.
right. Boom, 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 boom. All right, I'll read the second part here of Stan Rosenthal's version. Oh, I said it yawn. There we go. It is natural for things to change, sometimes being ahead, sometimes being behind. There are times when even breathing may be difficult, whereas its natural state is easy. I like that example. That's a good one. Even breathing's hard sometimes. Sometimes one is strong, sometimes weak, sometimes healthy, sometimes sick, sometimes is first, at other times behind. The sage does not try to change the world by force, for he knows that force results in force. He avoids extremes and excesses. He does not become complacent. So, really, the only difference I see here is the sage does not try to change the world by force, for
Mm.
he knows that force results in force.
Mm.
So I like that because again, we're back to the physical and the spiritual, right?
Hmm.
Force is in the physical realm, and it's just like the law of physics, right? For every action, there's an equal and whatever reaction,
Yeah, equal and opposite.
equal and opposite, and that's exactly what happens. You're like out there playing bumper cars when you're trying to do things out in the physical realm, and you're just bumping into stuff, and you don't even sometimes you can't even see. You might even be trying to just give somebody some advice, and you don't know where what's gonna happen. You have no idea what other actions are going to come out of that action. Like once you birth life to an action, you have no idea where it's going to go out into the wilderness and in nature and what it's going to yield. All right,
Yes,
let's back
indeed.
up. And that he avoids extremes and excesses. This is very just like the moderation, right? He does not become complacent. That one though, I don't see
Oh,
anywhere else. Go ahead.
no, I didn't. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I like that because Stan Rosenthal, we've already talked about before, how this version is more of like the air, or if you will, the swords version. Out of the four
Mental.
versions we have, this one is very, uh, he's very airy or like explaining everything. So
Mm.
and does not become complacent. So that's really good because it's really about being in the present moment, right, and not taking things for granted.
Right. And the thing too that I think of when I think of complacency, so when you think of moderation, you might think, oh, that's complacency, right? Because, oh, you're not for one extreme or the other. But he's like, no, I can be living in moderation and yet not be complacent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. You're right, because a lot of people will say that, like, oh, you're a flip flopper, like you can't make a decision.
Yeah.
You can't choose. You can't choose Biden or Trump. I'm guessing that's who's running. Um, you gotta pick one. It's like, well, I'm not being complacent. I actually have my eyes open and I'm in the present moment. And I'm hiking in the woods right now. Thank you, Instagram. I don't want to register to vote, but
Yeah. Complacency. Um, what are your thoughts? I'm just going to look up the definition because that always helps
yeah,
me think of
sure. I feel like what it says to me is it just means don't take things for granted, right? Don't just uh
okay.
go ahead, read it though.
I'm going to read. Okay, so complacent is an adjective. It means pleased, especially with oneself or one's merits, advantages, situation, etc., often without awareness of some potential danger or
Mm,
defect.
I like
Self-satisfied. So here's the example. This is the example. Oh my God. The voters are too complacent to change the government.
Oh, that's great. How can the voters change the government? We should send them our episode of the
The
show. Like,
Dow.
yeah,
Verse
that's what a
29.
synchronicity. That's so
Isn't that
hilarious.
crazy?
The voters are too complacent to change the government. That's so funny. But actually, though, they are true because they are true. They are correct because they're saying the voters are too complacent to actually change the government. You could look at it as they're just voting for A or B. They're not actually doing anything to change the government. They're just being complacent. They're not paying attention. They're taking it for granted. They're like, if I just pull this lever, everything's going to be great.
As
So
I usually say, yes and no.
yes and no.
So yes, the
Or
voters
like,
are too complacent, and no, the voters aren't too complacent.
yeah, exactly. Or as we used to do in the car business all the time, like if somebody asks you a question and they think you're going to say yes, like, hey, are you going to the thing tonight? I'm like, no, no.
Oh man.
Are you voting for Trump? No. Registered to vote?
No.
No.
No, actually, no, no, no.
Yeah. So that's a funny
Oh,
example.
wow. Yeah,
So
so he avoids extremes and excesses and does not become complacent. So he doesn't think he's just self-satisfied and perfect. He doesn't just go like, well, everything's just perfect. Well, yes and no. Everything's perfect, but no, it's not.
yeah, yeah. That's why this gets so tricky, right? And people are like, oh, you're just giving me word salads, and it's like, yeah, but you don't know. You think it's a
Yes, but no.
cucumber. You think that's a cucumber in that word salad. It's a zucchini, baby. We're hyping this up. That's not a cucumber. That's a pickle.
Yeah,
It's because of
that's
the
why
meanings of the
people
words. Go
might
ahead.
think we're nuts or crazy or not know what we're talking about, or we're floating on our whatevers and we don't have a solid foundation. And it's like, well, yes and no.
It's not us that's imperfect. It's the words. It's the voids.
The
It's your
voids.
definition of the word that I'm saying. But that again, though, that's why these religions or whatever you want to call them are different ways to look at the world. I'll call them religions, right? Or even belief systems. They can be used as a mind slavery system. Because if people don't know the words you're saying or what you mean by them, yeah, you're gonna like when Jesus says the only way through salvation is through me. People are gonna be like, all right, I guess I gotta worship Jesus now. It's like,
Yeah.
well,
It's like yes and no.
yes,
Or yes, but no.
Yeah, are you living how he lived though, or are you just worshiping this
Exactly.
guy on your wall on a cross? Like, are you actually,
Yeah. Are you actually following
that's
what
why I
he
have
said to
respect for
follow?
Christians who actually do,
Yes. I'm reading a book along with many other books that I'm reading at the moment, but
how dare
I'm
you?
reading a book called Mystical Christianity, I believe it's called.
Ooh,
Um, I can share it. Uh, it's Mystical Christianity by Jeffrey Hodson. I came across this author through none other than Bill Donahue. He mentioned in this one video, I think that Joe might have shared the video, and it was kind of like how he came to uh teach the things he taught and how he came to the wisdom and the knowledge that he had. And I wrote down all the names of these guys he was talking about. He read their books and all this stuff. And some of them I didn't even know how to spell their names because, sometimes names are spelled differently and weird. And so I did the best I could. I looked
Gurdjieff.
them. Yeah, exactly. Gurdjieff. I learned he didn't say that name, but he said some other ones that I was like, I don't know what that is. Eventually I came across their names and found some of their books. So this one was a guy named Jeffrey Hodson, and this book is called Mystical Christianity. I don't remember, but I think it was written posthumously because I think it was like gathering from his different lectures or his different writings and to put it into kind of like just a one piece it all together type of thing. Don't quote me, but I think that's what this book is. It's not a very long book, but wow, it's pretty cool. I'm enjoying kind of seeing his perspective. And he's Christian. Jeffrey Hodson's Christian. But he does talk about how all the religions of the world are basically um they're just like we've talked about before, they all contain some sliver of truth, but it's like imagine a circle and each pie is like one of the religions, right? And they all have their level of truth and light that they shine on the world. And he says, now I don't know because I don't know what he means by this and I haven't read the full book, but he's saying that Christianity is like an amalgamation of all of them, or like just like, taking all of those and kind of like an esoteric way of describing all of them. So something like that. I'm not finished reading it, but I'm about 20-ish% into the book.
Oh, that sounds pretty interesting. I could
Yeah.
definitely see that.
Yeah.
Getting all mystical on us. All right, let's bring this up. You want to read the Aleister Crowley second part?
Yes. All right. The wheel of nature revolves constantly. The last becomes first and the first last. Hot things grow cold and cold things hot. Weakness overcomes strength, and things gained are lost anon. Hence, the wise man avoids effort, desire, and sloth. So, that first part where he says, the wheel of nature revolves constantly, and the last becomes first, the first last. That's in the Bible. The first will be last, and the last will be first. I never really understood that when I was reading the Bible. I mean, I kind of did, but I kind of didn't either. And then I listened to this one Christian, like very well known Christian preacher, pastor, whatever, him describe it. And his description didn't even satisfy me. I was like, I still don't get it. Um, but, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So I was going to ask, what are your thoughts on that? It's like,
Oh,
now that I think about it just quickly, it's like the yes and no to me. It's kind of like that.
It
It's
is.
like
It is
they'll be
kind of
first,
like
yes, but no, they won't be first. They'll be
it
last.
is. It is kind of like, yeah, the yes and no thing that you're talking about. That just now. It's funny you say that. And the way I had it explained to me when I was a Christian, in the Christian church, was that, here you're last, like everyone ridicules you, you're a Christian,
Oh,
all this
yes.
stuff, but in heaven you're going to be first, right?
Hmm.
But if you look at that allegorically, and I think this is something that encompasses a lot, so this is only a little sliver of it, but I feel like what it means is that it might seem now like all this stuff you're going through is terrible, and you're the last. No one wants to, not a lot of people, I don't want to say no one because everyone knows this is the best darn show, but not a lot of people want to watch the
Watch her
Oversharing show
show.
and listen to what we're talking about, right? But I feel
Nobody
like
likes you.
no one likes me. But later, when this stuff comes into fashion, everyone's going to be like, whoa, we're going to be like number one on the list, right? And that's how I felt like my whole life. Like, I use this example. I've used this example before, but I was onto fluoride like in the mid 2000s, right? I'm like, fluoride is not, nobody wanted to hear anything I had to say, but now everyone's like, oh yeah, you don't want fluoride, like everyone, not everybody, but a
I
lot
was
of people
like that
don't.
about soy-based
Yeah.
products in like the early 2000s.
Right? So you were last then, and then you became first. So, but I think it's saying in this context, in the context of the Tao, is that everything's a cycle. You're going to be number one, you're going to be at the top, but then think of an athlete, right? A star athlete, Michael Jordan. He's the best. Everyone loves him. But then he has his dad killed because of gambling bets. No, I'm just kidding. Allegedly. But no, then he gets out of sports and he's not the number one basketball player anymore. Everyone
Someone
wants to
else
talk
is.
about LeBron James and all this stuff. It's the same kind of thing. Look at Bruce Jenner, right? He was on top. He was an Olympian, and then he
Look at
married this
now. I
lady.
mean, look at her now. I
He was
mean,
on a reality show, so no, he was just last on that reality show. And then he's like, "I'm a woman now," and then he became first again. You know what I mean? So it's like, and when I say first, I just mean in the public attention, right? He just shot up to so it really is just a cycle, and it's trying to tell you that the last shall be first and the first shall be last. So it doesn't matter if now you're first, you will be last at some point, and now at some point, I mean, if you're last at this point, at some point you will be first. So you just kind of got to take it as it comes. I think it's like about acceptance at its deeper meaning and deeper level.
I
How's that?
appreciate that. I appreciate that because I was probably coming around to that, but I just didn't have time to sit and think about it. And that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
I'm sure you've heard the Christian explanation, like I said, though, right? Right. Kind of like in that context.
I heard a really weird explanation of it, and I don't, it was kind of like, well, something about when you're running in a race, um, and you have all these runners running next to you and with you and stuff. I don't know. It didn't make sense to me because I can't even think of I don't even remember how it was explained. So I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense at all.
You could use for running, you could use the example of like the tortoise and the hare.
Yes.
The
Yes.
hare, the rabbit's so fast, everyone's putting their
Appears
money
to
on the
be so fast. And
yeah, and they think he's going to get there right away. And then the tortoise is just slow and steady, but the tortoise never gives up. He just keeps going on, right? He's like,
and the
and
hare maybe gets distracted along the way and
yeah, because he's so
doesn't.
fast, he thinks, oh, it'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it gets a good one. Good
But
one.
this is an advice guy. I wouldn't bet on a turtle if it was racing a rabbit. Everybody, I'm just like, we don't give gambling advice here in the Overshare.
Funny. We recently went to the casino, one of the casinos around
Yeah.
here in Scottsdale. And we met up with some people we know. And Tony, one in the chat, was there. But yeah, what was I gonna say about it? Yeah, it's casinos. You're at a casino.
Yeah, you'll see the first last and the last first there all the time in casinos or any kind of game. That's a good one. Like poker, especially, man. You could be down and then all of a sudden get some good cards and now you're up. That's the funniest feeling. I've had a feeling of being down a bunch of money before and then like like we used to go to Atlantic City. So say we'd go for like 2 or 3 days during the week. And right when I got there, if I lost some money, I'd be down, and then I'd win and I'd be up even more than I lost. And I still had that feeling of like being down. It was like, well, I don't, wait a minute, I have
That's
money now. It's so
bizarre.
weird. And that's the same thing about not being in the moment, right? And that's the true secret, I think,
Mhm.
even of poker, if you want to do really well, is you just can't care in the moment about the money. Like obviously you want to make the right decisions and there's all kinds of strategies, but your game, say you get good at poker and you're really good, you can't let the money affect you. You have to make the call, and not worry about the money you're going to lose. Just make the right call, even if you do lose. Same kind of thing.
Yeah. What was I going to say about being there? It was an interesting place. I'd never really paid it. Like the only time I've ever been in a casino was in Vegas, and I was just walking through it. Because I had to stay there for a conference I went for work. But I was like, had no interest in playing the games or anything like that. And so when we were passed by a craps, whatever table, Cody's like, have you ever seen craps played? I'm like, no. So I was just watching a little bit and he was explaining stuff to me, which I don't even remember because I don't get it. But
7-Eleven.
I just was like, not interesting to me at all in the least bit.
Yeah, that's the craps tables. I used to play craps. I mean, every once in a while, I haven't played in years, but I'll play if I have friends that are playing or whatever. We're out in Vegas or something. But I do prefer poker. But craps is that way too because you could be on a table and all of a sudden it's just like hot. There was this one table when we were in Atlantic City. Actually, there was a table. One, it was at a different casino though, but we heard about it. They actually broke the record for the longest roll. So basically what happens is in poker, I'm sorry, in craps, when you get the dice, it's your turn to roll. You have to roll whatever you roll. If you roll a 7 or 11 right away, you win. If you roll 2, 3, or 12, you lose. Anything else you lose, I mean, anything else you roll establishes the point. So if you roll a 6, then you get the dice back and you have to keep rolling until you get a 6 or a 7, and then you lose. And 7 comes out the most, which is the craziest combination, right? But what happens is if you don't roll 7, say you roll 6, you get the dice back and you get to roll again. If you roll a 7, 11, anything you roll in your first roll, even if it's a 2, 3, or 12, I think you still get the dice back. But then you roll 2, you establish the point. Say you roll an 8, you got to keep rolling, right? So this person kept rolling for like, I think it was like 8 hours or something. And people were just standing there because if you leave the table, you lose your spot. Somebody even said somebody peed at the table or whatever. I don't know. But people were making so much money because you could just, at craps, when someone's rolling, you could bet on any number to come out. There's different odds. So they just kept betting and they just were like winning, winning, winning. And then eventually they shut the table off and waited until the person lost their point and then they shut it down. And that happened to me one time when we were at a table and I ended up making like $500. And this is when I would bring like 50 to bet. So I was super excited. My friend won like 1,000, but it just kept rolling and rolling. And we were just on fire. And the casino saw that. So they shut the table down. But yeah, craps is very interesting. Let's not get sidetracked and talk about casino stuff because I used to basically live in casinos. I could be here all day. All right. Anyway, so did we read the Aleister Crowley? Did you have fun though? Casinos are interesting places. Either, you could still have fun without even gambling. There's so much good
Yeah, I
people
mean,
watching
I
there.
was just hanging out, chatting with people, and we had come to meet to a meetup there, and so we were just catching up with people.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. All right.
So yeah, I was reading
It's cool that you got to see one of our audience members live in person.
yes. I hadn't seen him in a while. Okay, so he talks about, you know, hot and cold, cold and hot, weakness, strength. And then he says things gained are lost anon. I haven't seen that word in a while, anon. So I looked it up. It means either in a short time or soon or at another time. Archaic, it means at once or immediately. So either way, It just, things gained are lost very quickly, pretty much. It's like when they say easy come, easy go, right?
Exactly. Speaking of the
I
casino,
almost thought, yeah, there you go. I almost thought
and
you
you.
had
And funny thing is, you brought it.
I almost thought you'd cut off. So anyway, I was like waiting. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, for sure, because I've seen that happen too. People who are wild and reckless with their money, they might win a lot, but then they'll lose it really fast too. Yep. So hence the wise man avoideth effort, desire, and sloth. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. If I was in school, if when I was in school I knew about the Tao, if I had this version, if they were like, "You're not showing enough effort," I would have been like, "Look, the wise man doesn't show any effort. It's against my religion to show effort in this class. How dare you, teacher?" That probably wouldn't have worked because it was a Catholic school, but I could have tried. All right. Yeah, and the part about the effort that could be a little confusing, and I really think all that means when it says the wide man avoids effort, it just means he doesn't try to make things the way he wants to be. He just goes with the flow, instead of expending effort or having desire. Or in sloth is just the opposite of that, right? Not doing anything. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just really like way woo way, doing, not doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're not really doing, when you're in the flow state, there really is no effort. You're just flowing.
Indeed.
All right. I guess we can go on to the next verse. Ooh, it's already 4:03. We've been cranking.
Wow.
Verse
Yeah, we
30.
didn't even touch verse 30 yet. So let's go.
All right. Let's go. All right. Stephen Mitchell from 1988, verse 30. Whoever relies on the Tao in governing men doesn't try to force issues or defeat enemies by force of arms. For every force, there is a counterforce. Violence, even well intended, always rebounds upon oneself. The master does his job and then stops. He understands that the universe is forever out of control and that trying to dominate events goes against the current of the Tao. Because he believes in himself, he doesn't try to convince others. Because he is content with himself, he doesn't need others' approval. Because he accepts himself, the whole world accepts him. These are probably like my two favorite verses. I'm gonna tell you.
Right? They're very,
This
it's
for
cool that we read them
Yeah,
together. It's the same time.
yeah,
All right. Did you finish?
yep.
Okay. Dwight Goddard entitles this Be Stingy of War. When the magistrate follows Tao, he has no need to resort to force of arms to strengthen the empire, because his business methods alone will show good returns. Briars and thorns grow rank where an army camps. Bad harvests are the sequence of a great war. The good ruler will be resolute and then stop. He dare not take by force. One should be resolute but not boastful, resolute but not haughty, resolute but not arrogant, resolute but yielding when it cannot be avoided, resolute, but he must not resort to violence. By a resort to force, things flourish for a time, but then decay. This is not like the Tao, and that which is not Tao-like will soon cease.
Ooh. All right. Stan Rosenthal entitles verse 30 A Caveat Against Violence. When leading by the way of the Tao, abominate the use of force, for it causes resistance and loss of strength. Showing the Tao has not been followed, and loss of strength, showing the Tao has not been followed well. Achieve results, but not through violence, for it is against the natural way and damages both others and one's own true self. The harvest is destroyed in the wake of a great war, and weeds grow in the fields in the wake of the enemy. And weeds
Army.
grow in the fields in the wake of the army. Yeah, there you go. Army. The wise leader achieves results, but does not glory in them. is not proud of his victories and does not boast of them. He knows that boasting is not the natural way, and that he who goes against the way will fail in his endeavors.
And Aleister Crowley entitles this A Warning Against War. If a king summons to his aid a master of the Tao, let him not advise recourse to arms. Such action certainly brings the corresponding reaction. Where armies are weeds. Bad harvests follow great hosts. The good general striketh decisively once and for all. He does not risk by over boldness. He striketh, but doth not vaunt his victory. He striketh according to strict law of necessity. This reminds me of Brandon. Not from desire of victory. Things become strong and ripe, then age. This is discord with the Tao, and what is not at one with the Tao soon cometh to an end.
It's interesting to me too, because this was written sometime in the 20s, directly after World War One. So him and Dwight Goddard had a really good view of what a disgusting, ugly war looks like. Not today, where they make it like glamorous. So
yes,
yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. All right, well, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more. So I'm going to come back up here, read the first part of this. Now, I like this because it talks about governing, and we talked about government and mind control and all that. But it's not necessarily an evil thing, because sometimes you need, there's people that need a ruler or a leader, or there's like a civilization that needs that big brother, big daddy force in their life, right?
They need to vote, Brandon.
They need to vote. You're right. They need to. So I'm not going to judge them. I just don't need to. Whoever relies on the Tao governing men doesn't try to force issues or defeat enemies by force of arms. For every force, there is a counterforce. Violence, even well intentioned, always rebounds upon oneself.
Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord.
Yeah. And this goes back to like what you were saying. I said in the wrote Brandon says, it's kind of like self-defense. It's the same thing.
Like your intention is not violence.
Yes.
But if you're like, this reminds me of what we were watching last night, that Ip Man video or movie, I should say. But you're not doing it to be violent. You're resorting to it because it's your only source of defense. So yeah.
But could it be that if you live in accordance with Tao, you probably will never have to worry about any of this stuff?
That's always what I think about myself.
Yeah. And that's why I don't, I might allegedly may carry a firearm sometimes, totally legally, everyone. But I don't think everybody should, and I get it. I didn't for a while because of this. I thought, I still am not like I carry it all the time. Anyone trying to rob me, you can guess when I do or not. No, but yeah, I feel like it really is just about your attitude on all this stuff, right? It's like, are you gonna bring it into your universe?
Yes. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that before I read?
No, go ahead. We'll get into it. This whole verse is pretty self-explanatory, so we'll probably get through pretty quickly anyway. But yeah, go ahead.
Dwight Goddard, be stingy of war. I like that. When the magistrate follows Tao, he has no need to resort to force of arms to strengthen the empire, because his business methods alone will show good returns. Briars and thorns grow rank where an army camps. Bad harvests are the sequence of great war. Now,
I like that, because they're taking a spiritual idea and bringing it into the physical by saying, when an army camps somewhere, the land gets all screwed up. After a war, the harvests are terrible because all the farmers are in the army. They're not tending their crops, right? So I feel like, and I, reading that Wheel of Time series, or listening to it anyway, there's all kinds of different armies on different sides and all kinds of different stuff. You really, the way that the book was written, you can really see the damage of all the armies and what they do to the land around them. They just kind of suck them dry of food and resources and everything. So it's really like, before you go to war, do you really want all this other crazy stuff to happen, or what you're about to go to war over, can you maybe settle that in a different way that doesn't involve thousands of men lining up to try to kill each other and women?
Right. And it reminds me a little bit of Bhagavad Gita.
I was just going to say that. Go ahead.
Because, and that's why I don't know, I think that it's talking about a spiritual war inside of you going on. But it metaphorically uses, your family members, people that and you going against them, going against your own
As above,
people.
so below, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You ready for
100%.
Stan Rosenthal?
Yeah. I am ready. Go ahead.
All right.
Or no, me, go ahead.
Yeah,
A
you go
caveat
ahead.
against violence. When leading by the way of the Tao, abominate the use of force, for it causes resistance and loss of strength, showing the Tao has not been followed well. Achieve results, but not through violence, for it is against the natural way, and damages both others and one's own true self. The harvest is destroyed in the wake of a great war. The weeds grow, and weeds grow in the fields in the wake of the army.
It's kind of like what Dwight
That's
Goddard was
basically what
saying.
we've just been saying,
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
And again,
I think we're talking over each other.
It could definitely be argued.
I feel
Yeah.
like there's a
And I
delay.
think it could be argued, though, that sometimes, yeah, there might be. Hey, everybody out in YouTube world, how we doing? Are we making sense to you right now?
Go ahead. You talk.
So I think that, we'll laugh through the delays. Sometimes there could be a righteous war, war of freedom or defense. If you're a slave and a bunch of people captured you and your friends and they're making you do things, I think that's totally different, because then things are out of nature anyway. They're not going according to nature. But I feel like if things are in accordance with nature and you're a ruler and you're trying to subjugate others, war isn't the way to do it. That's what they're saying right here, right? It's like, no, you don't have to go to war. There's other ways. You got to win the hearts and minds, man. Hearts and minds.
Mm-hmm. Next verse.
Yes. All right, let me bring it up. All right, go ahead.
All right. Aleister Crowley entitles it A Warning Against War. Warning is a caveat, so Stan Rosenthal said. Pretty much same thing, but he says violence instead of war. All right. If a king summoned to his aid a master of the Tao, let him not advise recourse to arms. Such action certainly brings the corresponding reaction. Where armies are weeds. Bad harvests follow great hosts. And I'm guessing when he says hosts, he means like hosts of people, like a host of armies.
Yeah, a great host and army. It's like some biblical stuff.
It's like, yeah, he's very like esoteric and biblical sometimes. Yeah, so basically, I mean, just in different words, he's saying very similar to what the other guys were saying. It's not like you said, it's very self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm. All right, Stephen Mitchell, verse 30, the second part. The master does his job and then stops. He understands that the universe is forever out of control. And that's the key. It's out of your control, everybody. You got to go. It's like you're in a river, right? You got to do what you got to do, float downstream. Sometimes you got to swim upstream. And forever out of control. And that trying to dominate events goes against the current of the Tao, because he believes in himself. He doesn't try to convince others because he is content with himself. He doesn't need others' approval. This one is huge.
Mm-hmm.
This is all about external validation.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it meant for me. This is something I was going through at the time. And it could be a double-edged sword, because you don't want to just think that you're right and righteous in everything that you do and become blind. like a narcissist or something. But this is more about if you're depending too much on external validation, you want to try to depend on your own validation because, sometimes people don't always have your best, uh, they don't have your highest and greatest good in mind when they're trying to tell you things.
Yeah. And again, this little piece right here reminds me of that book I'm reading by Jose, Don, Don Miguel's brother. It's called Wisdom of the Shamans. And he talks about this, like, what is it that makes you want to, like, investigate yourself? Like, what is it that makes you want to uh, push your ideas on other people and make them believe the way you do, make them think the way you do? Um, it's like a self-investigation of why do you do that?
Why? Great question. That's part of the shadow work, right? Everybody
Mm-hmm.
gets wrong. And the last part is because he accepts himself, the whole world accepts him. And that has been very true in my life. No matter all the crazy things I've said to people, or they might take them as crazy, about space or whatever. But if you accept you in the way you are and you're comfortable and you're not trying to convince people because, you're like, well, they got to think this way, or maybe I'm wrong. Sometimes that happens psychologically. We don't realize that we're convincing others because we're weak in our own faith. But when you're not weak in your faith and you're just like, yeah, man, I don't know, space could be real, it could be fake. Who knows? Have you ever been there? People might just laugh or whatever. So it really is all about accepting your own self the way you are. All
Yes.
right. Be
Dwight,
stingy.
yes. Dwight Goddard says the good ruler will be resolute and then stop. He dare not take by force. One should be resolute but not boastful, resolute but not haughty, resolute but not arrogant, resolute but yielding when it cannot be avoided, resolute, but he must not resort to violence. Again, there you go. By a resort to force, things flourish for a time, but then they decay. This is not like the Tao, and that which is not Tao like will soon cease. So I really like that. The being resolute is like, yes, I believe this way for myself. I like, just like Stephen Mitchell says, I accept myself. I This is how I see the world, but don't be boastful, don't think don't be arrogant and proud and boastful and like, oh, I'm right and I'm the best and I'm this, that, and the other. Don't be haughty, don't be arrogant. And then if need be, yield and say, I could be wrong. I mean, you should always yield a little bit. I could be wrong. I don't know everything. Um, but definitely for sure don't resort to violence. So I'm resolute, but if you want to fight about it, I'm not gonna like hurt you
I don't have to
because of it.
defend my point
Yeah,
of view, right? With
exactly.
especially physically. And
Exactly.
this whole part could be summed up by just saying, we're not making claims, we're just asking questions, basically, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
because if you want to be haughty or any of that stuff, it is like you're making claims and you're like, oh yeah, I know,
Mm-hmm.
but do
Yeah,
you?
exactly.
Because what if
So,
you're wrong? Because
mm-hmm.
if you're just resolute and then you were wrong, no one's gonna care. They're not gonna be like, oh, this guy's like, oh, I just gonna change my mind now because I was wrong. You don't have to like, go back and listen to all those people say I told you so and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it to that one. Resorting to force,
All right.
things flourish for a time, but then they decay. And none of that is
It's all
like the
about the
Tao.
cycles. Yeah. I love this reoccurring theme of cycles. It really, when you hear about all these opposites and scales and stuff, because like you could listen or read the Kabbalion and it'll tell you about scales and all that stuff. But in the Tao here, if you already know that piece of information, the Tao just drills it in even more. It really, I think by repetition, it really makes it start to make sense. All right, so a caveat against violence. The second part here of Stan Rosenthal's interpretation of verse 30. A wise leader achieves results but does not glory in them, is not proud of his victories, and does not boast of them. He knows that boasting is not the natural way, and that he who goes against that way will fail in his endeavors. So I love how he just simplifies it down to saying, basically you don't do it because it's just not the natural way. Don't worry about what's going to happen or what could happen or whatever. Or maybe, this time I boasted and it was fine, nothing happened. It's like, no, but it goes against the natural way.
I feel like he's saying the same things that Dwight was saying, but just a lot more concisely.
Yeah, concise and clear. Birds don't boast, right?
Right. Is there a bird king? Just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Sir, and then you got the king bird. You're like, damn it.
That's a reference to an old episode we did.
Yeah, that's it. If you're real or Sharon nerd, you'll get that one. All right, you can read the Aleister Crowley one now.
All right. The good general strikes decisively once and for all. He does not risk by overboldness. He strikes but does not vaunt his victory. He strikes according to strict law of necessity, not from desire of victory. Things become strong and ripe, then age. This is discord with the Tao, and what is not at one with the Tao soon comes to an end. Yeah, that's funny because that one sounds like, does that sound more like Dwight Goddard's? Yeah, that ending sounds more like Dwight Goddard's ending. But yes,
from the 20s, and they both got to witness World War One. I
yes.
like this too because the part where it says the good general striketh decisively once and for all, and this is a concept that I came across in my, well, not that I'm still anti-war, but in my big anti-war days, because a lot of the wars that this country was doing over in the Middle East and still doing aren't real wars. Like in a war, you want total as hard as you can hit them, as fast as you can hit them, because you want them to stop, right? You want them to stop what they're doing, and you hit them with everything you got. Well, this is more like an occupation, like Afghanistan or the Iraq War. I mean, yeah, we hit them with everything we had, but we stuck around, right? And we tried to occupy them and install our own puppet government over there. Well, we'll say the government attempted to install its own puppet government in those regions, and we all see how that worked out. Not too well. So I think if the cool part about this verse is he's not saying to never go to war. He's just saying that a good general gets it done right away. They're not lollygagging, screwing around. They're like, all right, we got to do this. We're going to do it. So I think that is really important because you can use that context in anything you're going to do in your life. If you want to quit something or start doing something or whatever it is, treat it like all out war and just go for it.
And it looks like that's the being resolute that Dwight Goddard was talking about. And he even said himself in a very similar fashion, the good ruler will be resolute and then stop. He dare not take by force. The same concept you were talking about. Strikes decisively once and for all. He strikes and then he stops.
Exactly. Amazing. See if there's anything else I want to. No, I mean, I think there really isn't much else to say about, like I said, these verses, verse 30 here, they're all pretty, especially, after going through all the breakdowns we've done in the other verses, this one's pretty clear about war. I like it. And I like how it says you should never do it because that's really not what the Tao is about. The Tao isn't about what you should never or what you should always do. It's just about your own experience and whatever comes up, working with it in that moment, in the present moment.
Yeah. He says things become strong and ripe, then age. He says, oh, okay. That's okay. So he says this is discord with the Tao, but he's talking about what follows, or what's discord with the Tao, to be for war or something like that.
You strike it here. Let me pull it up too, so everyone can see what we're talking about. And then we'll. So right here, things become strong and ripe then age. This is discord with the Tao. Yeah, so I think what he's talking about is the whole verse. He does not risk by over boldness. He striketh, but not does not vaunt his victory. He striketh according to strict law of necessity, not from the desire of victory. I think all those things he's saying, that is what is discord with the Tao. Things become strong and ripe in age.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think it looks like it. He's saying, I think I get it. I'm just, it looks like it's a contradictory passage, but it's not.
It could be, yeah, it could be that this might even, you could put a space here after age, and then this is like summing it up. This is discord with the Tao, is like summing up
Yeah.
the whole verse. Well, summing up the negative parts, right? Like the vaunting and over boldness.
Right. Right. Yeah, because Dwight Goddard says by a resort to force, things flourish for a time, but then decay. So he's like a resorting to force. This is not like the Tao. He also says it.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, got it. I think Aleister just didn't necessarily word it in the best way, but it makes sense.
All right. Yeah, it is. It's kind of like a paradox, right? Because what precedes that statement actually is according to the Tao, right? Like the first part. I mean, just that
Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Well, what's going on, chat? Thank you guys for hanging out. It's been almost 2.5 hours that we've been blabbing about the Tao. Oh, what's up? Quiet Sparky Bear. This deep dive into the Tao has been amazing. Keep it up. If you're looking for me, I will be hanging out in the Oversharing After Hours chat on Telegram. Yeah, go get in there. Awesome. And it looks like Tony's going to Italy soon.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And if you get lost in Italy, and you need to get your way back to the United States, just give him your name, Tony, 2NY. We'll send you right to New York. One of my friends said that.
I didn't realize that. That's
I
funny.
guess it's like an old joke too or whatever, but he was like, why are all the Italians named Tony? He's like, because when they got to something about wanting to go to the United States, they just wrote 2NY on their head. And when they got there, it was like, Tony.
So all those got taken to New York.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why you have those New York Italians. Should I read the changing lines on this?
Yeah, you might as well. We can close out after that.
All right. So this was about shock, the card 51. And the changing lines, line 1 at the bottom is an unbroken line. It says, this changing first line indicates a time when good fortune follows a sudden change that may have seemed unfortunate at first. If we remain open to all possibilities in a time of crisis, the results can be shockingly positive. Line 2 is a broken line. It says, when chaotic events strip you of what is rightfully yours, it is of no use to fight it while the storm is raging. Retire to the mountaintop for now. Take the high ground. In the end, after the storm is past, this strategy will restore all that is yours without a need for contention. Ooh, contention. Fighting? War?
Mm-hmm.
Confronting uncontrollable forces when they are at their peak only brings further misfortune and loss. Line number 3 is also a broken line. It says, the shock of unexpected change can be paralyzing, easily scattering your concentration. This is not the time to stand back and watch things take their course. Focus is needed. Begin with small details and gradually reestablish normalcy all around. The resumption of habits and routines can protect you, keeping external misfortunes from infecting your soul. If you allow a jarring situation to motivate you to restore your focus, you'll be freed of possible ill effects. This is good. And line number 4 is an unbroken line. It says, a nimble mind evades onrushing fate like a matador twirls away from a charging bull. But even a nimble mind can become mired in muddled or jarring circumstances. Sometimes when you are stuck, you become a target for the horns of fate. If you had a clear problem, you could do something about it. But for now, don't force anything. Just try to keep your wits about until the dust settles. Line 5 is a broken line, and it says, a series of repetitious shocks is indicated. However, it is possible to avoid danger by remaining calm and staying near the center of the storm. Avoid dashing toward the extremities where added movement will only increase the risk of harm. Keep still as best you can. And line 6 at the top is a broken line, and it says, when startling events are at their peak, clarity of vision and perspective can be lost. The smart move is to withdraw long enough to be able to develop a coherent strategy, but this can only be done if your withdrawal comes soon enough, before turmoil has confused your perspective. Friends and associates may not understand the reason for your actions, and they may talk about these actions behind your back. But few leaders would charge in without plotting some sort of strategy beforehand. Sometimes retreating takes more strength and courage than racing to the front lines, and more wisdom too.
Oh, that's pretty synchronistic.
Yeah, quite.
I like that, especially staying at the center of the storm. It's like staying at the center of the circle.
Yes. Awesome.
All
Well,
right,
thank you
everybody.
for
Well, we hope you
listening.
enjoyed this episode of the Oversharon Show. If you'd like to support us, you can go to morelawsmoreproblems.com. Click on the Oversharon tab, and there's several ways to support us there. But the best way to support us, as we say always, is just be here, hang out when we're live or when we premiere our episodes, hang out in the chat, hit thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can know exactly when we're going to be live or premiere these things. And if you have any questions or whatever, fire them our way. Leave comments, let us know if you want clarification on something. That's what we're all about. We're trying to make all this stuff as clear as we can to our lovely audience, and that's our that's our intent here with the Tao, by going through it and really trying to get to the essence of what they're saying.
Indeed, it is. Thanks
All
to
right.
everyone for being here.
Yeah, this was
And
a good one. I
listening.
like it. A little longer than most, but that's good. These
Yeah.
were some of our favorite verses, so
Yeah. We
it
chatted a
only makes
lot toward the
sense.
beginning.
Yeah, and it's funny we didn't really talk too much about wanting to change the world and how it can't be changed, like, because we just broke down, and by breaking down what they're saying, we really just said
Yeah.
all we had to say.
Everything's perfect.
Everything is perfect. Could it be? All right, what do
Perfectly
we
as
say
it
to
should be.
exactly, everything's as it should be? That's a better way to put it, I guess. What do we say to the good people, Sharon?
That once you start over Sharon,
Then you totally stop being a Karen.
that's right.
And remember, everybody, we're not telling you how to live.
But maybe just giving you a few more tips on how to live a little more simply.
That's right. All right, everybody, thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. And we're done.